Good morning and welcome to the Environment and Sustainable Communities Overview Scrutiny Committee. I'm Councillor Eddie Adam, Chair of this committee. This is a remote meeting which has been recorded live to the Council's website and will be available to be viewed for a maximum of 6 months. Please be aware that any footage from the meeting can be used in subsequent media broadcasts. I would like to give a warm welcome to our committee members, Overview and Scrutiny members from Safer and Stronger, Councillor John Robinson, Councillor Pauline Craythorne and Councillor Nicola Dexter, who are representing Bishop Midland Parish Council this morning. I'd also like to welcome our council officers and any members of the public or media who are watching this live feed. And finally, I would like to extend a warm welcome to Mr. Stoddart, a member of the public who's attending the meeting to ask a question on item number 7. So welcome, Mr. Stoddart. It's a pleasure to have a member of the public here today. Before I commence the formal business, I would like to cover some housekeeping rules. Please, would all participants must mute their microphones unless they wish to speak. Please use the chat function on the right-hand side of your screen. Type in RTS, request to speak. Remember, everyone in the meeting can see the message in the chat function. When invited to speak, remember to unmute your microphone and please introduce yourself with your name and position, unless you have already introduced yourself earlier in the meeting. If you are having issues with connectivity, try switching off your video and just use the audio function. If connectivity issues continue, you may have to leave the meeting and rejoin to get a better signal. If my connection is lost, the Vice Chair, Councillor Olga Milburn, will take over until my connection is restored. Hope that is all clear for everyone. Moving on to the formal part of the agenda today then. Item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies, Jackie?
We don't, Chair. We have no apologies today.
Thank you. Item number 2, substitute members. Do we have any substitutes?
We don't. We have no substitute members today either, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. That sounds like we've got a good full house today. Item number 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of September 2020. Can members agree the minutes from the meeting on the 3rd?
Agreed, Chair. Agreed.
Do we have any matters arising from those minutes? No matters arising. Okay, as I received no request to speak and members have agreed the minutes of that meeting. Moving on then to item number 4, declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest recorded? If anyone identifies that they do have any declarations of interest during the meeting, please use the chat function to declare. Thank you. Item number 5, any items from co-opted members or interested parties?
No, Chair.
Thank you for that. Okay then, moving on to the formal part of the agenda is item number 6. And that is dealing with environmental campaigns update. This was for our committee to consider 4 flagship campaigns and their impact on improving our environment within County Durham. We have Oliver Sherritt, Head of Environment. He will present the report and he will be supported by Ian Holt. A presentation will be shared on your screen. You will find the full report on pages 13 to 18 in the formal agenda. It's now over to you, Oliver and Ian. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can everyone see this and hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. And that's the first hurrah. Over this short presentation, you'll be hearing about 4 different campaigns. Operation Stop It, which is about reducing fly tipping. Operation Spruce Up, which is about improvements to towns and villages. Some about In Bloom and Britain in Bloom and what we're doing in relation through to street scene. And then lastly, a very new campaign in relation through to find and fix. They are all very different. The top two indeed have actually won and share a common winning of the Keep Britain Tidy campaign of the year. But aside from that, they are actually all quite different. But they do actually all comply to a common approach. And that approach, which you will see throughout this presentation, will actually cover at its base education and awareness, because those are crucial to our campaigns. Going from there to involvement and participation, and then further on up that pyramid, council operations and enforcement. And it's deliberately done as a pyramid, because if we get the education and the involvement right, let's take the throwing down litter, for instance. If less people actually throw down that litter, then it means there's less resource needed in terms of council to pick it up, and less resource in relation through to enforcement as well. So what I'll do over the next 10 minutes or so is just take members through a little bit more detail in relation through to these campaigns, going up each of the steps of that that pyramid. So the first is in relation through to Operation Stop It, the campaign in relation through to fly tipping. And members should be aware that we've put out a lot of different information, awareness raising leaflets, pamphlets, and a variety of different media sources for that. But they're also targeted differently as well, in relation through to some of it being general, some of it being deliberately targeted for builders and those in the trade. And lastly, in relation through to some of our fly tipping hotspots, you might have seen sort of signage around on sites as a last minute sort of like deterrent to any would-be fly tipper. But then going up that pyramid is the opportunity for involvement. And I've heard here at this committee a few times going back in the last few years about the permits for household waste recycling centres, for instance, and how difficult it was to actually get hold of that, or those if you're taking a van through full of rubbish. We've improved in relation through to that and taken a step in relation through to that involvement in the last couple of years, for instance, in relation through to a permit scheme. We're also very much working alongside elected members and still have those cameras that many elected members have supported. We look for Crime Stoppers, for people to actually report those crimes, and we also look for involvement as well. A household waste recycling centre here at Stainton Grove, just recently getting the accolade of Household Waste Recycling Centre of the year. It's got lots of opportunities as well in terms of reuse, and there's a reuse shop there as well. Council operations are not just the council working on its own, and the figure and the picture you can see in the top right hand corner is that in relation through to all the data that is given in relation through to where are we actually getting those problems. And we work with other agencies, the Environment Agency and the police, in relation through to targeting our efforts and resources. And we've learnt along the way as well. You know, going back several years, we weren't actually identifying and stripping off those areas to know that it was under investigation. And members of the public might pass several times the same fly tip and report it to us unnecessarily. Whereas these simple stickers and banners help to declare that. And we've not been shy in relation through to enforcement either. Members will be aware, of course, in relation through to some of the social media stuff and the high popularity there. But some of it has also got national attention in relation through to caught red-handed, for instance. And we take the opportunity, such as in this vehicle crushing, to really sort of like bring home as a deterrent in relation through to fly tipping. Members particularly wanted to know about how we're doing with fly tipping, and this the graph here is quite revealing. It shows actually on the orange a year-by-year national increase of 20.5%, but it actually also shows at the same time a 28.3% decrease in terms of our county-wide figures for fly tipping. Members will notice there's no national figures for 1920, and I know that members are particularly interested in relation through to fly tipping in this last year. So let's have a look at that. In relation through to our impact for council services, members will be aware that certain services such as garden waste was suspended. In other areas, household waste recycling centres were also closed for a short time. Bulky goods were stopped for a period of time. And our neighbourhood wardens that did a lot of the enforcement work in relation through to fly tipping were also redeployed. You'll be hearing later in relation through to bereavement services, for instance, and some of them were redeployed to there. At the same time, with more people staying at home, members will not be surprised to know there was a substantial increase in the amounts of waste and recycling that was produced. In May, it went up 25% in terms of recycling, and then also about 18% in the same month. More people were at home. More people were not taking their holidays, and this is the result over this the first 6 months of this year. Not particularly sort of welcoming news from I'm sure from members' perspective and also from the services perspective. They worked so hard to bring in those figures down over the previous 5 years or so. And when you look further in relation through to what on average is about a 5% increase, a few things really sort of like jump out. You can see actually that the biggest cause is in relation through to smaller items of household waste, waste mattresses, carpets, shed clearances, and old furniture. So one can see actually directly the impact of COVID producing more waste and those waste outs or that waste having less outlets than previously. So members, of course, want to know about the solutions. Really good news that our services have been restored across the board. Bulkies are very popular. Garden waste is most popular that has been for years. Household waste recycling centres, members will be aware in relation through to some of the queues there. And wardens, indeed, we've benefited for extra investment in terms of the wardens. We're back on in relation through to education and awareness, and we're back on with a lot of our activities. You'll see, for instance, in relation through to recent publicity, a fly tipper worse off, and you can also see examples there in relation through to vehicle seizures. This is the sort of like the summary over the last sort of like 4 years, and members will be able to see actually some trends here. This last bit is only the last 6 months, so bear that in mind. Only the last 6 months. You can actually see that we're on course for redeploying those cameras. There has been some attrition there, catching more incidents than we did last year on CCTV, using our intelligence. Look at this one, the numbers of vehicles that are seized, those are going up. And this one is perhaps a little bit misleading. It's the number of prosecutions. It's the number of successful prosecutions. We've got about another 5 in train. And look at that one as well, the amount of fixed penalty notices for fly tipping. That's already, we're just halfway through the year and we're already up on last year. And whizzing through, because I want to just give a bit of an insight to some of the others as well. This is Spruce Up. Again, it starts with awareness. Again, in this instance, with school children designing posters for their local areas. It had loads of involvement. We've gone out to something like 37 different sites across the county. The work to be done. I've just lost there. Are people with us?
Yeah.
I've got to stop sharing, and then I've got to open my share tray again. I don't know what happened there. I will try again, and I will get back. Can people see that?
Yeah, that's back
Yes.
up again. Thanks.
Great. I don't know what happened there. Whole myriad of different people, lots of different partners, and then carrying on up that pyramid, lots of different council operations, not just one service, not just highways, but clean and green neighbourhood wardens, our building services in relation through to the painting work. We knew that it was making a difference from lots of positive comments, but we also undertook a lot of different surveys before any event, and indeed after as well. This is just a summary, but from those surveys, 90% actually saw a significant improvement after the Spruce Up took place. We're now moving from that Spruce Up. As I've mentioned, it took a lot of preparation, a lot of sort of like advanced work, and most of the smaller scale stuff were perhaps waiting a good few weeks to get sorted. Now we've developed this new scheme to be a lot more fleet of four teams of 3, to be supplemented fairly soon by groups with apprentices, maybe kickstarts as well, subject through to COVID. And these teams actually proactively will look around the county. They already know their respective areas, and do a lot of the works that will probably have to wait for a complaint to come in for us to actually action and take a graffiti, for instance. And by that time, 20 people, 30 people might have passed. And therefore, the whole idea of this find and fix is to be very proactive in the approach. We've only just started. We've only been going this last month or so. We've been going around the county, but it's those little changes. We are getting some very positive feedback about the big difference that's making, and the fact that the teams are multidisciplined really sort of like adds strength. That we're not waiting on for the painters to come along, or for some of the other disciplines to get it on their work programme. Really early days, but 113 improvements over 22 sites. That was given to me, this slide, a couple of weeks ago now, so I'd expect that to be much bigger. And this is the last one before I summarise really, but this is about also like a Britain in Bloom. Again, it's all the basic stuff of that pyramid which I've outlined. It's about the awareness, it's about the involvement, it's about the council operations playing its part alongside a whole myriad of different community groups. But this last bit here, I want to draw members' attention to. We will be doing some more publicity in relation through to this, but campaigns are about hearts and minds. Campaigns are about sort of like trying to sort of like change people's perception, and of course we do have the deterrent, the financial deterrent of a fixed penalty notice for littering, £150 discounted to 100. But we've actually trialled very successfully, and we will be launching this further, that if a person is caught, then rather than that full fine, 150 to 100, a £65 fine, so there is still a penalty, but you take this e-learning course, and that will actually take you through all the issues and the implications in relation through to littering. We don't know of any other in the country in relation through to that, and we're really encouraged by the positive feedback. The dozen or so people that have already been caught have actually fed back to us. Members wanted to know about the COVID impact on other campaigns. Big Spring Clean unfortunately did get suspended. We continue to support where we could, certainly on the groups of 6. This is prior to the last lockdown, of course, in relation through to equipment loan. And we also had schemes such as this Garden Treasures. Over 50 people took part in this. And this is people staying at home, but actually putting in their records of their hard work that they were involved with. And lastly, really just to sort of like to summarise the hallmarks of those campaigns. Those campaigns are not about one organisation. All of those campaigns have a community focus. All of them have some clear aims and objectives as well. A buy-in from across the council, not just one department. Communications is absolutely essential. We have a task group on each one of those to monitor, evaluate and adapt, and indeed the find and fix is an example of the adaptation as well. Positive momentum, and what drives us forward in relation through to this, whilst we have got setbacks, and we'll talk more about the fly tipping, no doubt, you know, the work that is being done is making a difference, and I think that's perhaps reasons why those campaigns have been so successful in the national arena too. At that, Chair, I'll just end, and I'll take any questions that members may have.
Thank you, Oliver, for that presentation. Very detailed in terms of the information, but also I think interesting and exciting to see how we develop our different campaigning methods in County Durham, and hopefully this find and fix will have an impact like the other campaigns. But clearly it's about encouraging, it's about supporting the community to make sure that, you know, they are aware that fly tipping, etc., is unacceptable, but education, as you say, is a key feature. Okay, I'll open that up to questions then. I've got Councillor Brian Avery.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, thank you, Oliver. It's a very good report. And I was very pleased to see a photograph there of the cut at Ferry Hill, which you did a very, very good job on that, the whole length of the A167 through that cut. The only couple of problems we have in Ferry Hill, especially on the terraced areas of Ferry Hill, such as Dean Bank and the terrace streets at the Broom and Ferry Hill Station. I saw on your triangle there education at the bottom, which you know, I 100% agree with, but we don't seem to be getting to grips with the tenants about putting the bins back in the yards. They're left out for weeks on end. Other people, responsible people, put contaminated stuff in their bins, then our bin men won't take them. Goes on and on and on. And we don't seem to get to grips with this. So whether the education's not getting through to these people to take the bins in, it's for their own good, because you know, it leaves them with the problem of either removing the contaminated stuff or they don't get the bins emptied. So I just wondered, you know, how far we are with this, Oliver, and is there going to be any improvements on that?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Avery. It is a really important issue, that, and it's there are a number of locations around the county where we do have that as a challenge. You know, starting with that education, as you rightly sort of say, you have hit on something that we are currently looking at to bolster still further. Ultimately, I mean, we've got roving recyclers that will go and will give door knocks to people, obviously not in this current lockdown, but they will advise in relation through to what goes in what bin. But on top of that, we are actually looking in relation through to more promotion of people actually getting the bins in after collection, and that can come in a variety of different formats. It can come in sort of like localized signage. It can come in localized letters. But sometimes it can be on us helping in relation through to labelling the bins as well. In some instances, you get a mix-up. You don't know whose bins is whose, so you leave them all out. And I think there's the answer is a whole variety of those, coupled as a last resort, with some enforcement where necessary. But we are looking in relation through to bolstering further the education elements of that.
Thanks, Oliver.
Thank you.
I'm going to take Councillor Olga Milburn first before I bring in other members from other committees, if that's okay. Olga?
Oh, hi, thank you. Yes, Oliver, I'm really interested in the find and fix thing. I think you're going to be inundated. It's an absolutely brilliant scheme, that, getting rid of all the little grot spots. However, my question is about the fly tipping when things are in isolated locations. Have we ever given any thought to using the What 3 Words app that is currently going the rounds? It's very handy for being able to pinpoint to, I believe, to within 3 meters or something of a spot. I just think that rather than try to describe where something is, especially when it's out in the open countryside, if the operatives could be able to use that, I think that would be a great help. Thanks.
I think that's a really good point, Councillor Milburn. We do get, when we look at our fly tipping figures, we do get a percentage that our crews go out and there's nothing found, and indeed we scratch our heads then and think whether or not we record it as fly tipping or whether or not it's not. So there is a wasted effort in sometimes us going to a location, and often it can't be sort of like precisely described. So your suggestion there, it isn't something that we've actively looked at before. We'll be delighted to take that further forward, because I would see it not only potentially benefiting in relation through to fly tipping, of course can have a number of other applications if people find things or come across issues and incidents and need to report it through to the police or other agencies as well. So I'll take that one back. It will need to, of course, have our workforce equipped in relation through to sort of interpreting those 3 words. But as I understand it, it's relatively straightforward, and I think that's an excellent suggestion that we could potentially take back and apply. Yes.
Yeah, Oliver, even a technological dingbat like me can use it.
Right. Yes. Well, me too. Then I think I would certainly be having a look at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver. Councillor David Boyce.
Thank you, Chair. David Boyce, member for Easington and chair of Safer Stronger Communities. I've got a couple of points, if I may, Chair. The first one, you mentioned, Oliver, about member involvement. Now, members paid a few years ago, we paid for some covert cameras, and I know a lot of members did, a few members didn't, but I haven't had any reports about them since, where they're getting deployed, how many are still in operation, because I've been told that there was a few of them that was taken out of operation, a few of them were vandalised, and just an update really of how many of those cameras that were paid by members, because I think we paid about 1,400 quid for them, are still in operation. The second one is regards to recycling centres. Now I know the one we've got in Easington Horden, there was massive queues. Now we've been told that there's a lot of other authorities where you had to book a slot before you could take the rubbish. At Hartlepool, for example, you had to, householders had to book a slot in. They had to take proof of where they lived before they could go and deposit them whatever waste that they had into their centres. So people were just saying, well, why don't you just go up to the ones in County Durham, because you don't need a bucket slot, you don't need to take any evidence of household. So our own householders were waiting in long queues when we know there was a lot of people from other authorities who were like coming in and just depositing their waste without having any of the checkups that other authorities are imposing on their residents. And finally, with regards to empty homes, we've got an abundance of empty homes over in the Easington, and you'll know from when you worked over this side, Oliver. And they become magnets for fly tipping. And a big gripe of us as members is, what can we do as an authority to make them less attractive to fly tippers? Because it's not just the fly tipping, that waste then becomes a target for arsonists as well. And we've had a massive increase over the last few years in the number of arsons, and a lot of that is down to there's a lot of waste in these yards where people can just go and set a light to. And the trouble is, they are tourists, so you don't just affect the one house, you're affecting a few houses. So that's my points. Cheers, Chair.
Oliver?
Thank you, Chair. There's a lot in there. Firstly, in relation through to the fly tipping cameras, I prefer to actually get back with the precise numbers. There has been some attrition. There has been some of those cameras that have been taken or have been damaged. And you have to bear in mind also that in the period of time, the technology moves on. I've shown you a picture of a very large sort of like device in the presentation, and they have got smaller and more accurate as time goes on. What we haven't done is actually reveal through to elected members exactly where their cameras have been deployed on a case-by-case basis. We've been as discreet as we can about it, but hopefully you would have seen from some of those oversight figures that I've given that we have actually successfully deployed them, and it's resulted in a number of different prosecutions. I prefer if I could get back with the precise figures to in relation through to it, and also at the same time consider what more we can do in relation through to general updates to members as regards their cameras. Whilst we need to maintain an element of being discreet as regards where they are deployed. The second is in relation through to household waste recycling centres and booking systems, etc. Firstly, we're not aware from data that we've got that there's any great sort of like cross-border movement in relation through to visiting the household waste recycling centres, and we can certainly be assured that anybody getting a permit has to be within County Durham. We are looking and have been looking in relation through to booking system. They are no panacea in themselves. They can sometimes delay your visit because you might not be waiting for a while to get a trip, and then also they can pose traffic management issues in themselves if you actually turn up not without an appointment, or you need to get turned around or whatever, and therefore need resource in terms of attendances there. But it is something that we will review, and we are indeed actively looking at that now that we've moved to winter operations of the centres. And then there's the thorny issue in relation through to empty homes. I can say that what we're doing in terms of learning from there in terms of the fly tipping. Initially, we would be sending out through to landlords community protection warnings and notices requiring them to move their waste. And what that resulted is sometimes that same waste, yes, getting moved within the timescale, but then ending up in another empty house, and the whole process begins again. This time, in terms of those notices, we're actually requiring the landlords to actually show where the waste has been taken to by an authorised carrier, and that is helping. The other things that can help a bit more, and we've done this in certain areas and continue to look for opportunities, is target harden those areas. Sometimes if they're without a boundary wall or a fence, it's easy to hoist stuff in there, so it's to make it more difficult in relation through to that. And I know colleagues in relation through to our housing are looking for accreditation as well, and that might offer opportunities via incentives or via standards in relation through to improvements. There's no miracle cure through to any of those elements, but those are the sorts of things that we would look to deploy.
So, okay, David.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks for the opportunity to speak.
Not a problem, thank you. I've got 4 other speakers, Oliver. Can I bring in Councillor Charlie Kay, please?
Thank you, Chair. Charlie Kay, elected member for Cowden and enthusiastic member of this committee, no less. Just keeping you on your toes, Chair. Oliver, I am understanding it correctly that the recycling centres are currently closed, are they not?
That's incorrect. They're all open.
They're all open.
If you would have saw some publicity over the weekend, it was only for a temporary closure. I think there was the Roman Way. There was some essential works by the power companies at that site. So all of our sites are open, aside from those temporary closures.
Well, that is good news and explains what I saw at the weekend and misinterpreted incorrectly. What I would say beyond that is, as you alluded to in your presentation, at times when people are locked down at home, they're more inclined to start tidying the house out, because you've got to do something with your time. You might as well do something productive with it. They'll be up in the attic or wherever and generate more household waste. It's easier said than done, I'll agree, but is there somewhere we could increase our capacity to recycle this additionally generated household waste, or are we just really building up ourselves for a problem at some point in the future when lockdown ends and people are able to move around, and we see what we've seen at the recycling centres, which was quite it was nobody's fault, but it was quite chaotic, I have to say, at times. Certainly at the one at Roman Way. So long story short, Chair, what I'm asking is there any possibility or any thought gone into increasing our capacity while we're generating extra capacity to deal with that capacity? Thank you, Chair.
Charlie. Oliver?
I think, Chair, that the biggest thing that we can do is operating within government regulations and guidance is actually keep those household waste recycling centres open. You can see indeed in terms of the report that the impact when they were temporary, sort of like closed. We are also putting some extra resource through on the bulky collections as well, and those have been really busy. These are sort of like extraordinary times, and Chair, I'll go into a little bit more detail in my waste presentation later on as well, because that will cover some of the points, including the impact on recycling, which isn't a wholly good news story in relation to some of the contamination there as well.
Thanks, Oliver. Yes, Charlie, obviously there is an item further on the agenda where we're specifically talking about the issues that you've raised there, and Oliver has indicated he'll bring that up.
Thank you.
Okay, not a problem. I'll bring in Councillor Bev Colt, please, before I bring in Pauline Craythorne. Bev?
Thank you, Chair. Bev Court, Eshen, Witten, Gilbert Ward. Morning, Oliver. Thank you very much for the presentation. And it's two things. Firstly, a comment and then a question, please, if I may. I would just like to thank yourself and the team for the phenomenal work that's been put in. I've been inundating the team a lot recently with work, to be honest with you. And I have to say they've done an exceptional job. And I really think they should be recognised for that. So I just wanted to say that to yourself. Second one is a question about education, please. Obviously, COVID-19 has had a massive impact on the work that can be done with children. And I'm just trying to establish if there are any plans in place to try and see if we can develop any online educational training or any sessions which, yes, I appreciate under normal circumstances we would like to go into schools. But this would also enhance the number of schools that could be covered, and it was just to see if there was any plans on that, please. Thank you.
Yeah, Oliver.
Well, firstly, thank you for the kind words, and certainly I'll pass that on through to the teams involved. And yes, and this won't be a surprise that we are looking in relation through to expanding quite a bit our sort of like online resource. The Civic Pride team during the first lockdown were involved in developing those resources, and we're now in the phase where we're starting to roll those out. I would add as well, once I've covered through to members the e-learning element for littering, we are also looking to expand that as well in relation through to some of the other issues like dog fouling and like fly tipping in due course as well. But for the general sort of like education work, yes, our Civic Pride team have been developing some resource there.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thanks, Oliver. I'll bring in Councillor Paul Sexton now.
Thank you, Chair. County Councillor Paul Sexton, Chester Street South. I'd like to just thank Oliver's team for the clean-up they've done on my ward. I know it's parochial, but it does need a mention. I think the overall effort needs to be recognised. It's transformed a shopping area, shall we say, which had almost been forgotten about. And in these COVID times, it affords the shopkeepers to use front and back now. People were keeping away from the back. It was poorly lit, it was overgrown, and it really has transformed. So thank you very much for that. Oliver, I'd just like to ask about, we touched on cameras. Again, I don't want to mention the particular lane, but it's a rural part at the edge of my ward, and I think every couple of months we have some small and some large fly tipping, and we talked about with officers about funding cameras, but we can't always discuss where they're going to go for obvious reasons. But is it possible that councillors, if they do fund, could have an influence, shall we say, on where they go? Because, you know, if I funded additional cameras, I'd want them predominantly on my ward and the problem areas that I've got. So that's my first question about the cameras. And the fines for fly tipping, I'm probably one of, I don't know how many people, I don't know what people's views are, but I think our fines should be larger. I understand the educational element, and let's see how that goes. But I think putting people off fly tipping, if the fines are so large, would that not work? Is there any evidence of that being done in the past and perhaps not worked? Thank you, Chair.
Oliver.
Thank you. In relation through to the variety of points there. Firstly, in relation through to the cameras, yes, we will try as best as we can take on board members' views as regards where their cameras should be deployed in their areas. You know your wards very well. I'll just add two extra sort of like dimensions on the camera front, which I haven't covered. Occasionally, we do tap in and work with the police in relation through to number plate recognition. You have to be pretty sure as regards the time of the incident, and you have to be pretty sure as regards the fact that there's not large volumes of traffic. But there has been issues and incidents where actually on a very rural road, you don't get many cars going down there. We've had the fortune in relation through to a number plate recognition camera, and then we'll be able to use that intelligence. So that's where sort of like one of the things that we'll be doing. Secondly, for the more urban areas now as well, one of the concerns that we had for those smaller cameras is that you put them out and they could easily get nicked. Now we've got 6, or we're getting 6 of the redeployed larger cameras that can go out and about. We need to test this a little bit more, but can go out and about in our more urban areas and are still overt. You'll be able to see that they're there. We need to make them really hard to get to, but those could sort of deal with some of those sort of like localized issues of alleyway sort of fly tipping as well. And then the fines for fly tipping can actually be £50,000 and a couple of years imprisonment. So in theory, that there are the fines available. Quite clearly, it's down through to magistrates to determine what they want. Indeed, that's a Crown Court penalty. I think so far as the council is concerned, we do 2 things. Firstly, with fleet of foot, now that there is for a smaller amount of fly tipping, there is a £400 fixed penalty notice, and we have been issuing those, and you'll see from the data that we've increased the numbers of those that are around. And then secondly, on top of those fines, we actually try to make life difficult, particularly if you're using a vehicle that is associated with fly tipping. So that's why we've had a larger number of vehicles seized more recently, and that hurts. We know that hurts, so we're carrying on and doing it.
Thanks, Oliver.
Thanks.
Okay. As I said at the beginning of our meeting, we actually have representatives from Bishop Midland Parish Council. I've now got Councillor Pauline Craythorne who wants to come and speak, and I take it, Pauline, it's in relation to your specific issues in your parish.
Yes, it is. Thank you, Eddie. I'm Councillor Pauline Craythorne. I'm the elected member for Bishop Midland and West Cornforth. Bishop Midland and West Cornforth have had a real lot of fly tipping over this last year, and it's very difficult because it's always in places where we have no cameras or there's no one there to see anything. I would like to ask Oliver a question regarding, I'm pleased our collections are back up and running from the homes, but we've got a lot of people in COVID lockdown and since the beginning of COVID who have lost their jobs. They're not working, and they haven't got the finances to have rubbish taken away from the home. Is there any way that the council can look at either reducing the cost so that it'll be more affordable and it'll make people want to have the fridges or the mattresses, etc., taken away by the council instead of dumping them on open ground? Or even putting them outside for the scrapmen to pick it up, and then they take what they want and then they just dump it. The other question is about education, and we're on about when you have a job done. Most of the fly tipping, I'm sorry to say, is done by people in business, and we always, on your screen, on what you had on, was that residents should know where the rubbish is going to. Do the builders have to give the residents a confirmation letter of where they're going to tip the rubbish at, or is that something we could educate people on to ask that they do have a letter of where they're taking their rubbish and where it is going to be dumped, so that if it is fly tipped and there's any comeback, we've got a trail of where we can go. Obviously, at Councillor Nicola Dexter, Eddie will have a lot more to add to it, so that's all I'd like to say at the present time. Thank you.
Thank you. Oliver?
Yeah, thank you for those questions, and sorry to hear that the Bishop Midland has had its problems with fly tipping. In relation through to the costs, clearly our household waste recycling centres are free, and those can be used. I appreciate that not everyone has access through to a vehicle, of course. And on top of that, we do try to keep our bulky goods collections as cheap as possible. We are amongst the cheapest in the region at £16, and the £16 can get you several items. There is also the discretion that members might have in relation through to some of their local funding, and we do fund local cleanups and community skips, etc. So that could be done and supplemented as a one-off type gesture if there was particular sort of like issues in their area. And in relation through to duty of care, yes, as householders, we should be looking in relation through to anybody that gives our waste, gives that out. We should be looking for some evidence that they are legitimate. The ways to do that is to actually look on the Environment Agency website. We can send a link through a chair in relation through to that, and those will be able to confirm that whether or not they've got a waste carrier's license, or they should be able to confirm to you. And we do a number of spot checks in that regard. And finally, as one of our dimensions for enforcement, and we're working through with our legal colleagues in relation through to this, but we are also looking proactively in relation through to some test purchases, just as you do for underage activity and test purchasing. We'd look for test purchases of goods from a County Durham home, and when someone turns up on the doorstep, the expectation is that they will have their waste carrier's license with them to remove our goods. So that is something that we are looking at as part of our enforcement element as well.
Thanks, Oliver. Does Councillor Dexter wish to say anything at this point? Are you happy with the questions being asked?
I would like to add to the questions asked, actually, thank you. We have also asked about installing additional cameras. We have also offered to pay for them, but we don't seem to have reached a satisfactory agreement about this process. Like the other councillors have already mentioned, we also have problems in rural areas, and cameras. I was interested in the number plate recognition camera. That might be something we could look at in more detail. Oliver, the other thing that I was interested in was the fly tipping that we have noticed. A lot of it is black bags, some of it is drug paraphernalia related, but also I think there's a gap between the campaigns that the council run and householders. So if I was having a house cleared, I wouldn't necessarily know to ask about a waste carrier permit that my builder may or may not have. I know that you're doing loads of work around with the schools, but is there something that we could enhance? Perhaps it's already in existence. Can we make a better awareness to local residents about what the process is or should be to be a more responsible resident, and ensure that the people we employ to get rid of our household waste do what we think they are doing? Thank you.
Oliver, thank you.
I think that's a really good point. We could always do with more sort of education from householders. When we do track back some of the fly tip materials where we got the evidence through, there are a number of instances where that householder is shocked that they and we feel it's quite genuine that they gave their materials in good faith without realising they actually have a responsibility for it. We actually do potentially have enforcement powers in that regard as well. As a council, we haven't gone down that route as yet, but in theory we could start fining householders if their waste ends up somewhere that's been fly tipped. We've not gone down that route because I think we recognise and want to do more in relation through to householder education, and we'll explore what more we can do. In terms of your cameras, I'll pick that up a little bit more with the team and find out where we are. There is a limit to the camera deployment, however. What we can't do, because they are sort of they have to be put in places where you don't catch a lot of innocent activity, people going about their daily lives. It's not meant to be a sort of like a hidden spy camera that then is used for a whole variety of different reasons. The limits to them are really that it has to be out of the way place, genuinely, and ones where you're probably only there because you're likely to fly tip. That might discount some other areas, and in those other areas we have to think carefully with our legal colleagues as to whether or not we need what's called a RIPA authorisation for it, which ultimately will end up going through to magistrates for that level of surveillance. So that might be a limitation on your cameras, but I don't know whether or not I'll find out where we are with that, and we can look to progress.
Thank you.
Thanks, Oliver. I've got one more speaker, and then I think we need to move on to the next item. I've got Councillor Jeanette Stevenson.
Thank you. Oliver, it was going back to the ability that we have as councillors to be able to report incidents, and I've had so many issues recently with the system, the Do It Online system. I like to be able to do it myself, which is obviously the way that most of the public needs to be able to do it. And I found, particularly in this area, which is, you know, where I get the majority of my complaints, the list that you can use to actually find a form is really very limited. And I just wondered if there was any opportunity to look at having the whole system, you know, become more intuitive, you know, and be able to search for something rather than a list of things that lead you often in directions that you don't really need to go. You know, I've struggled, and, you know, I'm quite good with IT, and I'm a councillor, so I know the system within County Hall, for example. So anyone who is, you know, just trying to report something as a member of the public must really struggle. Thank you very much.
Oliver.
Thanks, Chair. I'd welcome a further discussion about that. When we introduced the online system, it was a great leap forward because you know, people otherwise had to sort of like to phone the council, and so I know that it's really useful for a whole variety of different reporting purposes. But I also know we're not perfect at it. We went through a period going back sort of like a year or so ago where our workforce were getting the service request and pressing the button to sign it off without realising actually that the resident or the customer would then got a message saying your matter has been resolved, and they'll look outside their house and it wasn't resolved. So there are issues like that, and I also come across some stuff that you know, we need to make the reporting as easy as we can and have the right categories without actually losing people in a matrix of the stuff. So We're continually learning, and I'm happy to make some further contact with you about the specifics of where it is still like cumbersome, so that we can help to refine that system.
Thanks very much, Oliver. Really appreciate it.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Oliver.
Steve.
Just to expand on that, Jeanette, as well, and in terms of the online system, obviously there's an opportunity for councillors to feed into the online system to suggest improvements as well. But by all means, obviously speak to Oliver about your specific issues.
Thanks
Okay,
very much.
Thank you. I'd like to thank members then for the comments and suggestions. We do have a recommendation for overview and scrutiny on page 12, paragraph 6, where members of the committee are recommended to note the content of the report and comment, and we've done that, and I'm sure Oliver will take on board your comments and report back, especially in relation to the CCTV that was mentioned. Okay, thank you. Moving on to item number 7 then. Bereavement Services, a report of Corporate Director of Neighbourhoods and Climate Change. The report can be found on pages 47 to 62. And again, we have a presentation by Neighbourhood Protection Manager and Bereavement Services Manager Ian Holt and Graham Harrison. Over to you, Ian. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can everybody see that okay?
Yes, thanks.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you very much for inviting us to present this morning. I'll be leading on the presentation side. You'll find that there's a pretty detailed report that supplements the presentation, so we'll be taking you through today some of the services that are covered, and you'll see from the slide in front of you that covers crematoria, cemeteries, woodland burials. We're covering public funerals, the development of new cemeteries and the expertise that comes along with that, along with elements of memorial safety and community involvement. I put this slide up specifically because it's complicated, okay, and I put it up there specifically, and it's at the back of the report. But essentially what it does is it highlights that it's an area of service that has many facets to it. We have our clean and green teams that ensure that the burials are undertaken by digging the grave, but they also maintain the closed churchyards, the open cemeteries that we've got. So, and there's a significant amount of work that goes into that. We have elements of my direct team that provide the inspection regimes that arrange maintenance of the closed churchyards, the liaise with friends groups, and indeed they also undertake the public funerals. And then finally we have the administration team that sits within business services, and they do everything from the liaison first and foremost with funeral directors or families to arrange for burials, as an example, arranging for memorials to go up, changing of deeds, etc. So that part of the reason for putting that up is that it looks complicated and there's quite a lot on there. That's not unlike lots of services, of course, but I put it up there specifically to reinforce that. We have within our cemeteries, we have put some images up there, but we have Ropery Lane, and they are places of significance for our for the bereaved and their families. They are places for remembrance, and as such they are treated with care. And we're proud that over all of the locations across County Durham, we've probably got more green flags than any other local authority. This slide here just covers the things that we provide, and it's not just Durham County Council that provides burial space in cemeteries, but obviously there are parish and town councils that do that. There are private woodland sites, as an example, as well as faith. There are both open cemeteries that are really active through to really ancient closed churchyards that have been transferred from diocese. and indeed we've got woodland site, and I've got a particular slide that covers that for Durham. It does cover everything from burials through to the maintenance and indeed headstone inspection across all sites that we've got direct control of. And you'll notice from this the graph at the bottom that in general terms there's been a reduction in terms of the number of burials. The 2020 is only a part year, of course, and there's an obvious reason why there's an increase this year, which is due to the increased number of deaths, sadly. And there's something like 10 to 15% of services are held through our cemeteries, compared to 85 to 90% that are held through our crematoria within Durham. Key issues within our cemeteries is firstly the sensitivity, and there's a significant amount of effort that's put in place to ensure that we liaise with families and funeral directors and with clergy and celebrants and the like, and we always hold that as a starting point with any of the services that are provided. We have been running out of burial space. There's been additional extensions that have been made at places like Pelton and Sacriston. There's been a new one at Moorside that was brought in place a number of years ago. So we're trying to attend to it, but it is obviously, you've got a fixed amount of space, and it is one of those challenges that we've got. In terms of funeral poverty, and you will have probably seen lots about this within the news, on average in the northeast, families are going into debt by about £1,700 per service. Obviously, the costs associated with a funeral are everything from the burial fees or the cremation fees, but also the funeral director fees, and indeed anything else that the family may wish to do, and that's a real challenge. And indeed, the Competition and Markets Authority relatively recently brought out their provisional findings looking at the funeral industry. Unsurprisingly, it's highlighted that there's, in elements of the industry, there's not a great amount of transparency, that families are following what traditionally they may do. Another key issue for us has been COVID, and indeed the changing regulations, the speed at which things have moved on, and that has been a real challenge. The woodland site, I said I would just touch on it. The site that we've got in Durham is next to Durham Crematoria. It's one that was started up by a community interest company originally. Unfortunately, that went by, and we as a county council picked up on it. It's an alternative. It's got environmental credentials in terms of the use, the type of coffin that's used. It is just the most beautiful place, and we've created glades down there with burial spots. We also have a friends group that look to support, and a lodge that they offer out to families for use as well, and it's just the most beautiful place. In terms of crematoria, we've got two that are in partnership with other local authorities, Spennymoor Town Council and Gateshead Borough Council, a separate financial entity, and then there's a private one at Coundon. We provide a whole range of services different to cemeteries. You can get virtually any music that you'd like. We provide organ services where people want them. Webcasting of services have been particularly important during COVID, because family members have not been able to go in the numbers that they might traditionally go, and of course places like churches have been shut, which has increased the pressure on them. But we also have significant opportunities for people to remember their loved ones through books of remembrance and memorials. And I'll touch on recycling of metals because that's a separate area, separate slide. We've seen significant amounts of investment. I know the report goes into more detail around that, and that's increased parking, improved the services that are available within the chapel. We've improved our energy efficiency, as well as meeting the legal requirements around mercury abatement. And again, the key issues are very similar to those within a cemetery, barring burial space. And again, the number of awards that our crematoria have achieved are noteworthy. And indeed, we had the Federation of Crematorium and Cemetery Management doing audits on both sites just within the last few weeks, of which there's been glowing reports come back. Numbers, we do something like 4,000 cremations. This slide covers the difference between the numbers that we see through Mountset compared to the one within central Durham. And again, 2020, it's not surprising that we've seen an increase there. Just some images that really bring it to life. You'll note the top right there, really less chairs because of the requirement for social distancing. The bottom right is images of our memorial garden at Durham Crematoria, and then at Mountset, again the chairs, and then the Book of Remembrance building on the bottom left there, that is a separate opportunity. And indeed, over Christmas, under normal years, or Easter, or when families come together, the crematoria is has significant numbers of people that come to pay respects, and we're open for these facilities. Are open every single day of the year because people want to remember their loved ones. I said I would cover the recycling of metals. We ask if people want to keep any elements of their loved ones, and so that those that don't, we then recycle the obvious parts that don't come out from the process. This is a national scheme that we joined through the Institute of Cemetery and Crematorium Management, and you'll note that nearly £200,000 since we started has been given to local charities, which is a significant amount. And those charities have included things like hospices through to Cruise Bereavement, which is a counselling service, and indeed others as well. Really worthwhile. Memorialisation. The only thing I'd probably add to this would be we've expanded the range of opportunities for people to the memorials that we've got, and indeed we've got some trees, some metal trees that are arriving very soon, where people can put the names of their loved ones on. And again, it's at a different cost to families, but that's been really popular, and it helps people remember. The public funerals, we have a requirement to deal with funerals where there's no known relatives or that there's no means. You'll note from the graph there that there's been a significant increase over recent years, and the only reason for a dip this year is that's only part way through the year. And we look to support by if families are unable to pay, to point them in the direction where there may be support. But outside of that, if there's no known kin, then we'll do the searches. We'll look to respect the wishes of the deceased. So if they say that they wanted a particular songs, or they want to be buried as opposed to cremated, then we'll do all of that and provide a service to respect them. I've covered probably the achievements. There's a slide there that just covers some of them. The impact of COVID has been quite significant. Clearly, we've seen excess numbers of deaths, which from a service perspective, and the majority of those have been through the crematorium, although there's been an impact on the burial side as well. Just to put it into context, something like 500 over 2 months in April and May was the additional number of cremations that we actually handle, which is significant. And we've had to keep up to date with the regulations as they've changed on an ongoing basis. And as the report highlights, that actually if it wasn't for the staff that we've got who provide services in the most difficult times, we'd have probably struggled to cope overall. And that's been the full-timers, but we've also drawn in from wider services, including some of my other services, neighbourhood wardens, who have been trained up to use the cremators or provide the front of house service, or indeed the administration. So it's been a joint effort, team effort, and overall we've needed to expand the services at points in time during that peak to 7-day week working, and with extended days at the crematoria. The equipment's been really important, and we brought in a temporary cremator at Mount Set Crematoria to make sure that we could cope whilst we prepare to replace the existing equipment. And then indeed the controls have been really important. So we've liaised on an ongoing basis with funeral directors. We've put up plenty of signs to help people, remind them of the basics of face, space, and sanitisation. We clean between each of the individual services, and we are prepared for any potential second wave, and we keep an eye on where the numbers are with that. I think that the key issues, you know, the sensitivity and the ability to respond in a sensitive way to individual circumstances is absolutely paramount. I've covered the constant change in regulation, and indeed some of the legislation goes back into ecclesiastical law as well. Funeral poverty is an ongoing issue, and just to give you an example of how some of the ways that we've adapted at the crematoria, as an example, we have slots that are available for direct cremation now, and also some slots earlier on in the day that are a different price, and that helps us attend to some of that. And indeed, I've covered burial space and COVID. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. A lot of information in there for members to ponder over. I haven't got anyone requested to speak at this moment in time. If members do wish to speak, put RTS in the chat function, please. Just while we're waiting, Ian, just in case members are a bit slow in bringing in. Question in terms of obviously funeral poverty, which is obviously going to be a real concern as we move forward with COVID and lockdown and furlough and people obviously now being made unemployed. That situation can only get worse. Are we aware of anything that the industry is doing to trying to look into this a lot deeper and trying to make funerals cheaper, or at least supportive to people who are finding themselves in these situations?
Yeah, I mean, we try where possible to help people understand where the help is, and there's a social fund which is accessible. There's certain criteria around that, and we help direct people where we can. We obviously make them aware of the things that, as I've just outlined, on the crematoria side. But outside of that, there is the Competition and Markets Authority that has done a provisional findings around this, that looked at both funeral directors and indeed the crematoria side as well. And it highlighted that, not surprisingly, people are very traditional in what they might do. They might go always to the same funeral director that they might have used previously. You know, for understandable reasons, people are in a very difficult point at that point in time, and we all would get caught between, well, you know, my dad or my mum or whoever it might happen to be. We'd want to do the best for them, but obviously that number of £1,700 in terms of debt is significant. And then finally, the only other thing that I would probably highlight is that we are investigating whether or not we as a local authority should set up our approach to providing transparent costings and providing a service that provides a funeral directing, and that's something that we're currently investigating.
Okay, thank you, Ian. Again, like I say, I've had no members wishing to ask any questions. However, members will be aware, and I know the officers are aware, that we have Mr. Stoddart, a member of the public here this morning, who wishes to ask a specific question. He has already submitted his question well in advance. Members should have seen a copy, plus also members should be aware of the response from the service as well. But I think it's important now that I bring in Mr. Stoddart to go through, to give us a bit of background, but also to ask his question of the officer. Can I put you over to Mr. Stoddart?
Thank you, Chair. I'm Dennis Stoddart. My family has memorials in 5 County Durham cemeteries. The background to this short presentation in question results from the council undertaking maintenance in cemeteries, and as part of that process uses the herbicide Roundup, which contains a glyphosate, to kill the grass around the base of memorials to aid grass cutting. This, in my view, is leading to accelerated soil erosion and the destabilisation of headstones. Members in wards with cemeteries where my family have graves, and the chair of the committee, have been provided with a photographic survey to show how this is already causing soil erosion around our family's recently erected and refurbished memorials. The council carries out a testing regime on memorials to ensure they do not become destabilised to an extent they would present a danger to public and staff. A method was found to ensure memorials were safe by testing and action, but what has never been carried out is a study to determine why memorials are becoming destabilised and the role herbicides may be having in accelerating soil erosion, resulting in the destruction of memorial foundations. Memorials given enough time may well become unstable as a result of natural forces of wind, snow and ice. However, what I believe can be shown to be happening here is that the use of herbicides leave bare ground devoid of grass and their root systems binding the soil together, that there is an acceleration of that process. As a result, soil erosion is being accelerated and contributing to the failure of foundations. It is desirable, if not essential, that the use of herbicides be ended. Memorials would not become destabilised in a relatively short period of time. There would seem to be a divergence of opinion between liability for the memorial and the desire of the council to undertake maintenance at an effective cost manner. If we have, as we have been advised, the council is going to further review this matter, then it needs to do so based on a professional report into what is causing memorial foundations to destabilise. This request will ensure that a professional assessment is carried out and an appropriate report produced available to the council to make informed decisions. Turning back to the question before the committee, if approved, then such would provide information that would allow a focus on prevention of memorial destabilisation. This in turn would reduce the efforts and costs of the council in carrying out its duty of care to ensure the safety of memorials, reduce danger occurring from destabilised memorials, as well as reducing financial burdens for the council and the holders of exclusive right of burial, who are the owners of the memorial. In effect, a less destructive maintenance regime without the use of herbicides may well be the outcome. The question I've put is, I ask the council to commission a technical report to be made available to members of the council and the general public into why memorials and cemeteries where the council undertakes maintenance are failing the testing regime as a result of foundation instability, to determine what is causing the ground subbase below foundations to erode away when adjacent ground remains intact, that the report determines if the use of herbicides in practice causes damage or is responsible in a way leading to accelerated soil erosion, that they also be required to make recommendations to prevent such failures in the future in a cost-effective manner. The report to be undertaken by a reputable professionally qualified structural engineer, civil engineer and environmental specialist in the impacts and causes of soil erosion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Stoddart. I appreciate your question and the background for members to comment on. Ian, can I ask you to respond, please?
Yeah, that's fine. Hello, Mr. Stoddart. Nice to meet you. Thanks a lot for your question and indeed all of your correspondence that you've sent through. I mean, I think the starting point for me is that we know and we fully appreciate, as I think you've probably seen from the presentation, that cemeteries and closed churchyards are places of great significance to families and anybody that's buried there, and we recognise that, and we do try to maintain these spaces, and you know, we're proud that we've got as many green flags as that we have, and that's more than other local authorities within the country. But you know, we are aware that in some of our cemeteries over the last year and so, that perhaps our application of herbicides has been too wide in terms of it creating you know, wide brown patches, and you know, we think this that we're going to address that. But I think that you know, I am pleased to confirm that the vast majority of our memorials pass the stability test. and where they don't, often we would view that that's down to poor construction and the laid foundations. But of course, that's differs depending on the individual installation. Notwithstanding your concerns, and we take those seriously, and indeed the NAM advisance, and we do recognise the fact that there's some general reservations about the use of herbicide, as you've outlined. I'm pleased to let you know that we have commenced the review to do with the herbicides, although I'd probably highlight that there's no real easy alternatives. So to cease would mean that we might end up with grass growing high around headstones and where mowers can't reach. And to stream, of course, is more labour intensive, but we've also got the risk in that instance of potentially damage, and obviously you may also then spread grass across a memorial, which is not what we'd wish to do. So what we've done so far is that we've done some benchmarking with other councils, and the vast majority of them do use herbicides. And we are also undertaking to seek advice from the wider industry bodies, and NAM is one, but there are a range of other bodies within the industry. And we will undertake further investigations as to what the options might be. So that might include that, we'll look to the alternatives, we'll look at the impacts, and we'll also look at the costs associated with these options. And I think it's important that we do that. I think in terms of your specific question to do with a technical expert, I mean, I think if we see that there's that arises as part of the review, then we'll definitely consider employing a specialist who would look at the causes of headstone instability. But I think we need to also have a mind on the fact that the number of headstones that we've got is very large to start with, and the construction and the ground conditions under each of those also varies. So what we also see that that might lead it to be difficult to have a conclusion because there's so many variables in it. Our key focus currently, though, is that we obviously, firstly, we want to recognise your involvement, your input, but also there's a wider interest in terms of environmentally friendly alternatives. So we want to explore what those alternatives might happen to be, which will be necessary if our current practices is to change. And I think finally, the thing that I'd probably want to highlight is that we'll clearly be wanting to keep this scrutiny board updated with where we get, and we're committed to making sure that we do all of that in a timely way.
Thank you, Ian. Before I bring any other members in, do you wish to ask any supplementary question or say anything in relation to the response, Mr. Stoddart?
Thank you, Chair. The issue, quite simply, is the implications for the council in terms of doing maintenance and the way that's undertaken, but also for those people who are owners of the memorial to bear the cost where destabilisation results and work is necessary. As I've said, I believe that the use of herbicides is in fact leading to an accelerated rate of soil erosion. And the way to get to the bottom of that is through a technical survey with professional people presenting information to the council and adding to the survey. You need that before you start, not at the end. With respect, that's what I believe.
Thank you. Ian, I'll leave you the minute. I've got three other members of the committee who wish to come in on this matter, and we'll deal with the three at the same time, if that's okay. So, Councillor Bev Colt first.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Stoddart, for the question, and to Ian for the response. I would just like to say that I welcome this review, Chair. We're all aware of the damage that these herbicides can actually cause to the ground, and this particular one, we know it's got a high acidic pH. It's approximately 5, so it does have an impact on the ground surface. Obviously, the areas it's being used, it's a very sensitive area, and we need to be doing the utmost that we can to make sure that these areas are well maintained, which I appreciate the team are doing. I would like to to see what alternatives can come up with. I appreciate strimming what you've said, Ian. It can increase the risk of damaging the headstones, etc. But personally, if there's a way we can try and look to go down that kind of route to minimise any risk to the headstones but reduce the use of herbicides, I think that would be a very good avenue if it could be done. But I would just like to say, I would welcome the review because I think it's a very important area that we need to look into. Thank you.
Thank you, Bev. Councillor Liz Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Liz Brown, Neville's Cross. As possibly the only holder of a pesticide certificate on the council, which allows me to store and use pesticides, I thought I ought to come in on this one. pH of 4.5. Given that neutral is 7 and it's a logarithmic scale, this is a fairly high pH. I can see it. We've seen the impact of acid rain on the cathedral, rotting away the sandstone. We have limestone gravestones. It will rot away that. It will rot away the cement in which the headstones are buried. We have also, I think this has to be looked at in a wider scale, because I don't know if anyone remembers that dog urine has been accused of rotting lampposts. Now that has a pH of 6.5. I would like to see this review, which I do welcome, to be extended to cover the use of herbicides around street furniture, because I don't know if anyone's noticed, but if you look, you can already see a bubbling round the base of an awful lot of the posts. So yes, let's have a look at the result of this review, because I find it rather worrying. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. Councillor Paul Sexton.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think Councillor Coulton-Brown have already covered what I was going to say, but just to reiterate, I would welcome this review. I think it's a sensible review, and you know, I hear what Ian has said, and I think it's testimony to the presentation that none of us had any questions. We're all quite happy with that. I think they've done an amazing job. I think not only around memorials and Mr. Stoddard's question on this, I think the general use of herbicides, I agree with Councillor Brown. It looks unsightly, but the aesthetics is just one layer of it. It could be damaging and therefore could be a false economy. What did we used to do? We used to trim everything, and I appreciate you could damage, but you would have to be going some to damage, you know, something with a strim, I would suggest. And, you know, I just think we really need to think out of the box on this one. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've got one more question, Ian, then we'll close that off and you can come and respond. Councillor Avery?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it's a very good point that Mr. Stoddard's raised, and I've noticed this is happening at the cemetery where I represent, Ferry Hill. That is Duncombe Cemetery, which is administered by the town council. So I welcome this report, and I welcome what you're trying to do, Ian. And would you cooperate or let parish and town councils know if you do find anything that you recommend, so that they could possibly introduce your recommendations? Because I think it's a very important point. I mean, I say the point about damage to headstones and in the cemeteries which I've experienced in the past, but when I saw this appearing around the headstones in Duncombe Cemetery, I thought, well, that'll stop the damage to the headstones. But now, when Mr. Stoddard's raised all this, there is another side to it. So I would hope you would let parish and town councils know if you do find anything and you recommend anything, Ian. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Avery. Over to you, Ian.
Thank you, and I really appreciate your input in terms of this. I mean, we're already committed to doing a review. We've already started some investigation, and indeed those are already following up with some of those some of the national bodies, because clearly we want to make sure that we can have something that's sustainable. Just to give you a flavour of that, actually we've already got a range of different cemeteries anyway. So there are some that are left to wildflowers. That is something that is appropriate for some environments and not other environments. And clearly, what we're trying to do is we're trying to balance the approach of we're all used to. If you look outside to my own garden, we're all used to cutting it on a very frequent basis, and perhaps that might link in with some wider elements. But what I don't want to do is preempt what we might get back from the different parties and what the options may do. And that actually may address the point that Mr. Stoddart is raising, which is part of the reason why I've said that if we need to, we'll certainly look to bring in a technical expert as well. Councillor Avery, makes also a very good point about making sure that we update. And in terms of Councillor Brown's point, in terms of the wider use, clearly the government's already licensed this through to a certain period of time. So the use of glyphosate is already on the agenda, and it's already being more widely reviewed anyway, and we will fit into however that comes. I can't remember the exact year when that license comes to an end, and it'll be up to the government whether they want to license it any further. But I think it's 2022 from memory, but it's absolutely on the radar for us. Is that okay, Chair?
Thank you. Yes, that's fine, Ian. Just one final question from me, and we'll close this particular section down. You made inference to the possibility of the foundations of these stones maybe not necessarily being as good quality as they possibly should be.
Yeah.
Have we got any evidence of that, or is it still too early to say?
Part of the reason why we look for memorial masons to fix to either the BRAM or the NAM standards is because that's part of the reason. Before, it was one of the early things that we did as part of a new unitary authority, is we reviewed, and indeed some were fixed with wooden dowels, etc., which and indeed in some instances foundations were sitting on top of the surface of. So we have anecdotal stuff, but in the background, part of the reason for us to adopting the BRAM or the NAM standards is that we want memorial masons to fix to a particular a particular standard. And indeed the latest review of that was 2018, which is obviously a couple of years ago, and that will continue to be updated and reviewed. So we're watching that, and that's part of the background to it.
Yeah, thank you. Like I said, I will close that off now, but just with a final statement to Mr. Stoddart. Just to thank you for your question and the background, and clearly the council is going to take your questions seriously. We realise it is a sensitive and also a costly issue for individuals, and therefore we will take this seriously. The officers have clearly indicated that they are got an ongoing review, and that review will continue until such times as they have sufficient evidence to suggest whether we need to possibly take it to the next stage, which may be a more formal technical report. Whether that will actually satisfy what you're after at this stage, Mr. Stoddart, I'm not quite sure, but at least the council will take it seriously. This committee will monitor that report, and if we feel it necessary that a more technical detail is required, then we will recommend that to the officers. So once again, thank you very much for your time today and for the officers' report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay then, so again we have a recommendation on page 46, paragraph 9, that we note the content and comment, and the committee have done so. Okay, moving on to item number 8 then. Overview of household waste management. Again, we've got a full report on page 81 to 86. This presentation is going to be by Oliver Sherratt again. but on this occasion he's going to be supported by John Shannon and I believe James Lee. Over to you, Oliver. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can you all see that? Can you see that, Chair?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. I'm going to attempt over the next 15 minutes to provide an overview of household waste management across the county, which is a bit of a tall order. But I'll begin with the big picture and then go through the waste hierarchy, beginning with reduction and reuse, recycling and composting, then waste treatment, talk a little bit about other waste services. I know members are particularly interested in hearing about the impact of COVID. And then in the last two slides, one, reflect on what's happened in the last decade, and then on the last slide itself, talk about, well, what the next one might bring. But the big picture stuff first, even in the last sort of like 30 or 40 years, parts of the world at least have made a journey, even in my sort of like lifetime of a lot of household waste used to be just thrown away. We never had any recycling bin. I'm sure many members were exactly the same, and you didn't really sort of like think at all as regards what happened to it. So we were disposing of a lot and reducing waste the least. The world has moved on. It's not a perfect world, of course, but it is one where, certainly in this country, we are more mindful and we try to adhere to a waste hierarchy of reducing as much as we can and only sort of disposing of as a last resort. And those really sort of like form the basis of the county's approach to household waste. So rather than just jump to the waste collection stuff, which I know is what a lot of people are interested in, it's very important to know and understand as regards the adaptation of this waste hierarchy, because if it's built into the design of those materials that we use, if it's built into the manufacturer, if we think about the recycling of it right from the outset, then there's benefits to the economy as well. And that isn't just blue sky thinking. Those are already here and evident in our county, for instance, in relation through to the jobs at Biffa more recently, in relation through to our plastics. And the other big picture is that we're a big council, of course, so it'll be no surprise to members to know that we've got over 300 frontline staff collecting nearly 250,000 bins every week. That needs a lot of vehicles. We've got 12 household waste recycling centres, 4 waste transfer stations, and across County Durham we generate something like 231,000 tonnes of waste, over 2,000 bulky collections carried out every month too. Starting then with this waste hierarchy, what are we doing in relation through to waste reduction? Well, a big area is in relation through to food waste. Across the country as a whole, we throw away about a third of our food. So it's a good place to start and to campaign on in relation through to reducing that wastage, smarter shopping. And we're also involved in stuff, home composting, promoting sort of like real nappies as well, reducing junk mail, and of course like reducing Christmas waste where possible. But beyond that actual waste avoidance, we also encourage reuse. We've got a very successful green move out scheme with the university going for a number of years, where live-outers at the end of their year, rather than throw away those pots and pans and those other items, they're actually taken and if needed pack tested if it's electrical items, and then returned to the new incomers in relation to students. We also promote furniture reuse schemes, working with the voluntary sector in relation through to community fridges. Members are already aware in relation to single-use plastics, and I've already mentioned the sort of Stainton Grove reuse shop as well. So household waste recycling centres in future are not just places where you come to leave your rubbish. Elements of that is actually also reused. But then going on in relation through to recycling, it seems as a complicated picture here, but very simple, really. That all of the recycling that is collected is sent to reprocessing facilities where it's sorted, often by hand, but also with magnets and other machinery. Then it's baled up, and then the products can be out on the shelf again in as little as 6 weeks. But perhaps the biggest challenge that we've got in terms of all of that recycling, and I'll come on to the COVID figures in a few minutes, is the contamination. It's people actually putting the wrong items, thinking, well, they can put in the pet waste or the food waste or the black bags. It might be innocent materials in those black bags, or it might be contamination. And when it gets to the sorting plant, at busy times, they don't have a chance to even open them up, so they're often discarded. So what we do need, of course, in terms of this waste hierarchy, is more recycling. We need more of that good stuff, but we need the right stuff as well. And therefore, no surprise that a lot from the waste strategy team help to promote the sorts of materials that we can actually take. And whilst we've been operating garden waste for a number of years, the materials from those have been taken to a variety of farms. Instead, this year we've actually in-housed those operations, and it's gone really well. Not only is it saving money for the council, we're actually producing volumes of a compost that, once it's passed its Environment Agency test, we hope to return potentially through to those garden waste customers. And then lastly is all of the stuff in your residual bin. Again, sort of like going back 4 or 5 years ago, indeed, but before then, a lot of our waste went through to landfill. Since then, we've now got a energy from a waste contract. That means a lot of diversion from landfill. You'll be able to hear some of the more recent figures on the performance. And that contract lasts us until 2025. It produces energy for enough for 39,000 homes. So that waste is still utilised in its last journeys, and we're also underway with a large multi-council procurement too. We also do other waste services, clinical waste collections, bulky waste collections. We've already touched on those. Household waste, bring sites, and trade waste collections as well, which, as you might expect, are charged for. Two sort of like key sort of like driving elements for us. Number one is actually safety, safety of our large workforce, and you can see there a picture with various elements of safety, the CCTV cameras, for instance, a brake safe scheme as well to prevent vehicle rollaway. And we also very much like respect and promote respect from our workforce. They are very much on the front line, and it is shocking to see the very rare, but it still happens, the disrespect, the physical or verbal abuse of our workforce. And yet, you know, they as members will know and appreciate are very valued members of our community, and the COVID has helped to highlight that. And then the second purpose of this slide is also to show that we adhere to a variety of policies as well in relation through to assisted collections, for instance, for those that are unable to put their bin out. And the crews also advise in relation through to contamination where that occurs, and log stuff like missed bins and contamination on our systems. Members were particularly interested in relation through to what happened with our waste. You can see on here a light purple line for the residual waste in 2019, and you can actually see this is actually the residual waste over the COVID period, and a very sort of similar pattern as well in relation through to recycling. In May, it was nearly 25% increase in recycling and nearly an 17% increase in residual. Unfortunately, this element kicked in as well, the contamination. I'd ask members to pause for a moment there. We're obviously into a second lockdown as well, but that second lockdown is also coupled with a Christmas period with more people ordering online. So we are expecting an extraordinarily busy Christmas, particularly in relation through to the recycling. And whilst after COVID things had started to settle down, these figures are now expected to diverge once again. So in summary, in relation through to COVID, we prioritised the refuse and recycling collections. We suspended for a short time the garden waste. We then put it on to a Saturday and Monday. We were absolutely delighted that the cavalry came through to the rescue as well, highways and leisure. We're starting to have some of those colleagues back with us now, particularly in relation through to leisure. Bulky waste stopped, but we've now reinstated that, and that is as busy as ever. Household waste recycling centres, I've touched on those in the previous ones. And of course, there's additional costs associated with those. The social distancing, for instance, has required extra resources in terms of the garden waste deployed during the week to support our main crews. And there's wider issues to do with disposal, recyclates, and some furlough in relation through to the recyclate outlets. The last two slides now, Chair, and I should be within the 15 minutes. Over the last decade, since local government reorganisation, of course, we've moved from different district-based systems of collections to one. Winding down the Elms Length Company Premier Waste, had new recyclates and energy from waste contracts, refurbished 4 waste transfer stations. All of that has generated, at the time, this was 2013 when we did get recycling income, unfortunately we don't anymore, but in excess of £4 million. Most of that went through to the medium term financial plan. With in-house the garden waste, it's not collections but the composting there, virtually eliminated waste to landfill. So it's been a really busy 10 years. But the next 10, including the next few months, are going to be really busy as well. We've got the ongoing issues and challenges of COVID-19. We will be getting increased tonnages. We're ready for those. We are reviewing what other systems we can put in place in our household waste recycling centres. We're now shortly to be in the competitive dialogue stage with this multi-authority waste treatment. We're very much a part of that. Potentially, of course, there is always the issues and opportunities of future savings pressures. This strategy produced about a year ago now indicated the potential for mandatory food waste collections by 2023, mandatory garden waste collections as well. So in time we'll have to gear up for those should they emerge at the timescales that were envisaged. We've always got challenges in relation to an ageing workforce. They do really good, and we are injecting more through new recruits where we can. We've got challenges, of course, in relation through to lower emissions, and lots of exciting work done. And then aside from all of that, I mentioned this circular economy. Expect that to play more and more, because those areas, those councils that are more switched on to the full waste cycle can exploit some economic opportunities from there too. So I think that's the last slide, Chair, and at that I'll end and take any questions.
Chair, you're on mute.
Thank you. Yes, Oliver, thank you again. Like I said, an extensive set of services there from your particular side of the council. Very important to obviously the community as well. But again, seems to be well run, very efficient and very effective, and always looking at modernising and improving. I was a bit concerned about the household waste recycling centres in relation to the contamination that you referred to, obviously over 34% contaminated waste. Can you tell me whether that was down to the way the household waste recycling centres were being run over COVID? Any times that I had visited the centre, there didn't seem to be any separation or segregation of these materials. They all seem to be bunged into the same area. Therefore, how much of a cost is that to the council? Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Sorry, I perhaps misled you there. The recycling or the contamination wasn't that of the household waste recycling centres. That was from the contents of your recycling bin that then went through to the reprocessing facilities. The good news is that that figure has actually come down, and I would probably put it through to the pressure that some households were under, and the fact that more people were sticking at home, and the usual members of the households weren't necessarily the ones that were putting things in the bin. And when the residual bin was full, probably they were resorting through to the recycling bin. Separate to that, and we are doing more work. The roving recyclers have returned pre the second lockdown. We are doing a lot more promotional work in relation through to that, and the bin crews that we're focusing on collection have now refocused on the contamination procedures as well. But the second point you do raise, Chair, is a very valid point as well in relation to our household waste recycling centres. When we reopen those, a whole variety of the supply chains were actually in a mixed position, and a lot of those were actually furloughed. So we didn't have the recycling outlets that we previously had. Plus the need to actually get people through the sites as quickly as possible meant the sort of the usual separation and segregation of materials that occurred didn't occur to the levels that we would have ideally wanted prior to COVID. So it wasn't necessarily a contamination in that respect, but it was a more sort of like a deliberate, people needed to dispose of the household waste, and unfortunately we weren't able to recycle as much as we could from those household waste recycling centres. That improved somewhat, but again might be taking a sort of like a backward step during this second period of lockdown.
Thank you, Oliver. I appreciate that. I'll take 3 councillors' questions initially. I have 5 on my list. So initially, Councillor Liz Brown.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Oliver, for that presentation. It's actually a very timely presentation because it saved me an email. I'm looking at the moment at an article in The Guardian about carbon emissions from waste disposal. Apparently, because of energy from waste incineration plants, the various people feel the UK will not be able to meet its commitment to net zero carbon emissions by 2050. Now, I seem to recall when we went for a look around the Suez plant that they did say that they filtered the chimneys to cut carbon emissions. Would I be right? Could you put my mind at rest, please? Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. I'll bring in Councillor Bev Coult next.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Oliver, for the presentation. 2 questions, please, if I may. The first one is just around garden waste. I know James Lee very kindly helped me with this earlier in the year, but with regards to boundaries, Oliver, do you know when they're due to be reviewed, please? Just we have quite a few rural areas who aren't able to benefit from the scheme and would like to be part of it. So that's question 1, when they're due to be reviewed, please. And question 2 is about food wastage. It horrifies me, to be honest, when I see how much food actually gets wasted. I've seen examples of it through being involved in a lot of community projects, which, yes, it has its positive impact on surplus can go into the communities. But I'm just wondering, what, as a local authority, what more can we do to help get the message across to the manufacturers that they need to look at the volumes of food which is being produced, because there's far too much of it, in my opinion, that gets wasted. And in addition to the volume that gets produced, can they look at the type of packaging that it's put into? And I just wondered what more pressure we could add on to that, please, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Bev. And Olga, I'll take you. And
thank you, Chair. And again, Oliver, thanks very much for your presentation. Actually, Bev's just touched on it there about the packaging. As we're all being asked to recycle more, reuse more, and compost more and refuse more in the way of packaging and things like that, is there a mechanism online for where we can request a smaller bin? There is a one for requesting a larger bin, but is there a one for requesting a smaller one? Quite sure that some small households would be quite happy to have a smaller bin if they were then encouraged to reuse and recycle the stuff that they throw out.
thanks, Olga. Oliver?
I'll go through each of the questions in turn. I think, Councillor Brown, I can only give you a sort of partially sort of like put your mind at rest in terms of the energy from waste. I think the part bit is that certainly as regards the government's waste strategy, which we are prepared for. There should be a lot less materials going through for energy from waste. That is the last resort in the waste hierarchy. So on top of all the recycling, there will also be the food waste elements, should that be collected separately, and should some of the other mechanisms from the government's strategy also come through, deposit return schemes, etc. It overall will mean that less will go through. So far as the technical elements from sewers on whether or not there's a CO2 scrub or not to reduce it, you know, if that's what you were informed when you were there, then then fair enough. I'm not particularly sort of like aware of that area, albeit I can get a colleague, probably John Shannon, who is listening in to respond to you outside this meeting on it. I think secondly, to Councillor Colt, the issues were to do with garden waste review. We do review how the year has gone. We review the lessons learned, and that will probably over the next couple of months we've got to determine, for instance, we've got to look in a crystal ball and work out whether or not we're going to collect Tuesday to Friday again, or whether or not we're still going to be on Saturday and Monday. We're going to have to contact Mystic Meg to get us the answer to that, and that is the opportunity that we consider sort of the boundaries. I don't want to overpromise, however, through to you. The boundaries are set there for reasons in terms of our sort of like efficiencies, but where we can extend, we will, and happy to get back to you in the coming months. And then your second question was in relation through to food waste. As the presentation sort of like outlined, we try to do what we can in relation through to that, but that is at our end. That's when the food is there, and we have community fridges, and we promote the Olio app for sharing, and we do various things on the Love Food, Hate Waste. We are encouraged that there are things within the government's waste strategy that tries to limit the supermarkets in terms of some of their buy one get one free deals, that you're encouraged to sort of like to over consume, as it were, just for that, you know, for that extra bonus with it, and potentially also even on the sort of like the health dimension as well, that there is opportunities there. But it probably won't be a sort of like a miracle sort of like cure for it, but looking at both ends of that, and really sort of like encouraging people to think more sort of like carefully as part of their shop. And then lastly, as regards the sort of the two elements carrying on about the packaging, etc. Yes, again, I'd encourage you to have a look at the government's waste resources and waste strategy. It promotes better packaging. There is more sort of tax penalties if your levels of packaging don't have high enough recycling in them. And then there's also elements in relation through to the producer responsibility as well, all of which, should they be fully implemented, should help to reduce the amounts of packaging that is produced. So far as smaller bins are concerned, the 240 was gone for because it fitted the general mould, and that does fit the majority of households. In Wear Valley, they do actually have a 180 litre bin, because that's what the council had there before. I'll look in relation to see whether or not there is an opportunity to actually to swap your bin, and if there is that, then happily we can look at that and maybe have a sort of an opportunity to do that through self-serve, etc. But it needs a little bit more sort of like exploring. We have to be obviously sort of careful of any sort of resources. We might have some smaller bins already in stock there, but something that's worthwhile exploring, particularly for those households that have very minimal waste needs. I hope that answers the questions. I suppose I'll find out in the next minute.
Okay, thank you, Oliver. I've had no response to that. In relation to the question about the energy plant, obviously John's happy to give that, John Chan's happy to give that information. As time is getting on, I think we can allow that to go outside of this meeting, and a response can go to all members if possible. Thank you. Okay, next I've got two other people want to ask questions, Councillor Stuart Dunn and Councillor Paul Sexton. Over to you first, Stuart.
Good morning, members. Good morning, Oliver. Stuart Dunn, representing Coxell Division. As you will be aware, the green recycling plant is based in our division at Joint Stocks. I've got no issues with that. We were consulted on its arrival and it's caused no issues with traffic, etc. There have been problems this season, though, with the compression of the waste collection and shredding into Saturdays and Mondays, and a breakdown of the odour control system. Officers worked on introduction of a temporary odour suppression system, whilst a permanent solution was sourced, and I understood that that had happened. And indeed, I've not had any reports recently of any issues. However, one constituent from Keller who lives very close to the site and has reported a number of issues had been informed, and he informed me a couple of weeks ago, that the new system wasn't working and wouldn't completely suppress the odour issues, which have caused Coxell in particular problems with when there's been an easterly wind. So I was just seeking an assurance that the new system is working, or over the winter while we're not collecting green waste, that the necessary changes will be put in place, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, so far as I'm aware, the new system is working. We've had to learn a lot in relation through to the composting process during the year. There has been some issues in relation through to odour. As you say, it's probably magnified by the fact that we have concentrated collections on a Saturday and on a Monday. As you'd be aware, we've attempted as best as we can to resolve those. But odour suppression is in place. The new it took time coming because parts were coming from Italy and beyond. That was in place. We also learned in relation through to the sorts of conditions that create it as well. So I'm mindful in relation through to when the wind patterns are in a certain direction, or the temperature is at a certain level, and we cease the operations then. And I think not only have we got this odour suppression sort of system in and learned from it, but hopefully from next year, we're planning at the moment to have the Tuesday to Friday garden waste collections. That will spread out the impact and allow sort of like lower volumes of sort of like turnover on the site as much as possible.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Oliver. Councillor Paul Sexton.
Thank you, Chair. Paul Sexton, Chesney Street South. Oliver, thanks for your presentation. Again, just to reiterate what others have said, really appreciate all the efforts of the team. They do an excellent job. There's one query comes back to me, and I'm sure other councillors have experienced this time and again, is in relation to garden waste. Obviously, there's quibbles about the cost, but I do explain that the service needs to be funded. But there are certain residents who can't afford that and therefore go without. And additionally, there are some residents, and particularly the autumn time of year, and just in my own street, there's an oak tree that's a few hundred years old, and the neighbour pays for the garden waste and could fill the bin 10 times over. So has to make trips away to dispose of it. Is there any sort of scheme, or could we look at some sort of scheme, particularly in those months and in general for these people who can't afford it, to help them out? Otherwise, I'm a bit worried that it doesn't go to where it should be going. Thank you, Chair. For low volumes of
garden waste, we would always actually advocate before joining the scheme for composting and home composting, and indeed the service helps to signpost towards subsidised compost bins as well. We recognise that wouldn't suit everyone's needs, but it's the most environmentally friendly way of dealing with garden waste, rather than actually transport it for composting. Beyond that, we're also happy to encourage neighbours, where possible, to share the bins as well. It might be something that is shared between 1, 2 or 3 neighbours. It'll be up to them to work out the sharing details. But so far as the council is concerned, we would then be able to come and collect. It doesn't really impact our resources in that way. And then beyond that is what is signified by the Waste and Resources Strategy, which is the introduction of free garden waste collection. Now, we have to bear in mind that would have potentially significant impact. It would go from 65,000 customers to potentially 120, 150,000 customers. And of course, there's the cost of all the receptacles, etc., that's involved. The government has indicated that should that be introduced, then councils will be recompensed for it. So from this council's perspective, we would look, of course, we would abide by whatever came out from there, but we would need to be looking at, well, there's the lost income of the £35 for 65,000 customers, but it's the added costs in relation through to the collection across the county, should it be made free of charge. And we'll of course be keeping a very watchful brief as regards any developments in that regard. Does that help answer?
Yes, thank you, Oliver.
Okay, thank you, Oliver. Thank you, members, for your questions. I haven't got any other questions for the officers, so obviously you will take on board the questions and report back as where necessary. So we have a recommendation on page 80, paragraph 6. Again, recommended to note the content and comment, and the committee have done that. Thank you.
Great.
Moving on then to item number 9, quarter 1 report 2020-2021 budget forecast. Again, we have a presentation by the finance manager, Phil Curran. Over to you, Phil.
Thanks, Chair. I'll just share the presentation. Sorry. Seems to have disappeared. Hold on. Okay. Right. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Right, thanks. So this is the quarter 1 revenue and capital outturn for the services that report to this committee within neighbourhoods and climate change. There's been a slight change this year in that with the split of the former rail service into regen economy and growth and neighbourhoods and climate change, there's a slight change in how the service...
Sorry to interrupt, Phil, could you share your screen from the beginning, please? The presentation from the beginning? Just above there?
Yeah, okay.
That's lovely, thank you.
Right, thanks. Yeah, so split into regen economy and growth and neighbourhoods and climate change. So I'll talk about the services within neighbourhoods and climate change here. Just give a bit of background about the services involved, talk about the revenue forecast and the variances as at Q1, and also a bit of background on the capital. So at the end of Q1, neighbourhoods and climate change were reporting an underspend of £500,000. Now, the important thing here probably to mention is in the reserves and outside the cash limit column of the £10 million. That's pretty much all of the additional COVID costs that we had to incur in Q1 that we will actually be getting back from the government in various funding streams. But it's important to remember that. That just shows the variances split across the individual services. So just in terms of the services that are involved, the main things to point out within environmental services, obviously Oliver's involved with, deals with refuse and recycling, clean and green, neighbourhood protection, fleet and depots, and also environmental management and conservation. Within technical services, we've got highways maintenance, street lighting, road safety, that kind of thing. Community protection is the kind of environmental health functions, public protection, environment protection as well, and certain elements of antisocial behaviour. And then within partnerships and community engagement, which is a new service in terms of reporting to this committee, deals with the area action partnerships, civil contingency unit, and also community buildings and partnerships. So in terms of the reasons for those variances, I think it's important to note that while the service is forecasting an underspend, there are some temporary underspends which are masking an overall position which is causing some budget pressures that could manifest themselves probably next year. Just to go down the list though, one of the most significant things, there have been some job evaluation appeals in areas such as refuse drivers and also neighbourhood wardens. So that's causing a pressure because that wasn't previously budgeted for. Service has also got some unachieved MTFP savings from a few years back, although that issue has now been resolved from Q2, so that won't be an issue going forward. Within the Highways Operations Service, despite COVID, the amount of work that's getting done over the course of the year is predicted to increase over and above budget, so that's bringing extra income in. Now the next three areas, this is where the service has had growth in order to bring in new refuse rounds, also to engage more neighbourhood wardens, and it was also envisaged that there would be a new HWRC contract, but all of those things have been delayed basically because of COVID. So while the money has been put into the budget, because those things haven't happened in entirety, it's manifesting itself as an underspend in the current year. Also, there's a small saving in terms of insurance costs, so that's building into the underspend as well. Just touching on the COVID financial effects, I know Oliver alluded to some in his presentation, but over the course of the service as a whole, we were forecasting that £10 million additional costs would be incurred. There's about £4 million of that is in the areas of waste disposal, such as the HWRCs. There's been supplier relief, also traffic management costs that we've discussed earlier in this meeting. There's about £2 million in refuse and recycling, which is to do with additional agency costs where people have had to, where operatives have been off sick, and there's also significant additional costs to do with the social distancing, the way that the crews are working now. Those social distancing factors also apply to highways, where there's an additional £1 million cost. And also in the partnership and community engagement area, there's a significant additional cost of about £3 million associated with the additional budgets that have been given to AAPs, and also the fact that members' capital budgets have been transferred to be spent on revenue, so that's had an effect. Just moving on to capital, there's a slight typo in this table in that the environmental services outturn should be 6,089,000, but the total's still correct. So just in terms of what's covered within the capital, in environmental services, most of the costs are around sort of sustainability, conservation schemes, climate change initiatives. There's also about £2 million spent on vehicles and waste disposal projects. The biggest amount there in terms of technical services, there's £33 million, which is on highways maintenance and bridges. And also partnerships and community engagement. There's about £4 million on members' neighbourhood funds and about £1.5 million on community buildings and AAPs. So that's expected to be fully spent throughout the year. So that's it really.
Thanks, Phil, for the information. Any members wish to speak? Can you put RTS in the chat function? Looks like you might have got off lightly there, Phil. Enough detail in the report to satisfy members on this occasion. Once again, thank you very much for your report. Can you change your control button? That's it.
Yeah. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, so recommendation on page 104, paragraph 7, requested to note the contents of the report. Thanks, members, for noting that. Moving on to item number 10, performance management for 2020-21. For quarter one, the report is going to be presented on this occasion by Tom Gorman. Over to you, Tom. Need to unmute, Tom. Thank you.
Got a dicky mute switch. Thank you, Chair. This is the regular report that members will be familiar with, where we report how services falling within the remit of the Scrutiny Committee have been performing. As members will be aware, we usually report the performance to committee every 3 months, a quarter in arrears. However, this report is a little different because it covers 2 quarterly periods, being the last quarter of the previous financial year of 2019-20 and the first of the current year of 2021. And that's because of the suspension of committee meetings following the government issuing their regulations restricting gatherings such as council meetings to prevent the spread of coronavirus, which has sort of interrupted our performance cycle. Obviously, the first quarter of the year, the current year, was heavily impacted by COVID-19. The government's first lockdown now was 23rd of March and substantially ended around 4th of July. So that quarter is, the performance figures do look markedly different from previous quarters, really. As members are aware, performance is reported against the 4 ambitions within our council plan, which was approved by council last month, and a series of performance questions. I think just to save time, the presentations you've already received this morning, performance issues within the report around environmental cleanliness, fly tipping, waste collection and recycling have already been covered, so I'll turn to the sort of residual issues outside of those sort of main areas that Oliver's already covered off in his presentations. So one of the ones around sort of cleanliness and antisocial behaviour really is bonfires reported to the council. So this is the first quarter of the year has seen an increase, so obviously that doesn't cover the kind of bonfire season which we've just been through, but in the first quarter of the year there were 302 reported to the council, which is a 175% increase on the previous year. And again, I think that's mainly down to residents looking to dispose of increased waste that Oliver covered off in his presentation by burning it in the gardens and allotments and that sort of thing. And lockdown has also meant more people being at home during the day, so more people are becoming aware of those things and reporting those things to the council. Turning to carbon emissions and climate change, there's a significant lag on performance data within this area, with the county-wide figure actually in the report relates to 2018-19, which was before the council declared its climate emergency. However, they do show an improvement on previous years. Similarly, carbon emissions for the council's own operations contained within the report is actually for 2018-19, but I have the latest figures available for 2019-20, which have just been sort of calculated and signed off, and they show a 51% reduction on carbon emissions, and that's against a 1990 baseline, as you know. So that's enabled us to set a new target of a 70% reduction in carbon emissions for 2025. And more detail will follow in the Q2 report when we report those figures officially, if you like. Traffic volumes did decrease dramatically during lockdown, steadily sort of increased back to around 85% of pre-lockdown volumes after the first lockdown. So that will have led to a reduction in vehicular emissions. And also there's a number of businesses which are temporarily closed during the lockdown period, and some which remain closed, of course, with the introduction of the new lockdown. So those changes will have led to a decrease in carbon emissions from both the business and industrial sector as well. It's likely to there be some increase from domestic properties offsetting that as more people are spending time at home, the likes of ourselves. But it's not yet clear whether these changes will have a longer lasting sort of impact on carbon emissions. As regards transport, highway repairs figures presented in the report again for the 2018-19 year, and again I've got the latest data of 2019-20, and that shows that A roads where maintenance is recommended is 3%, B roads the figure is 3.3%, C roads it's 2.3%, and for footpaths it's 20.9%. More detail of those figures will be presented following the publication of our latest transport asset management plan, which will be coming out in due course, where we have, you know, a wealth of detail, as members will be aware from previous presentations. And I think that concludes the performance data that I wanted to draw members' attention to, Chair.
Thank you again, Tom, for that information. I've got Councillor Rob Croot, who wishes to speak.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief. And just to put a marker down, really, I think this issue might have been raised at another committee, and Tom's just touched on it right at the end of his report there when he was talking about highway maintenance and also footpath maintenance. I know it's important that we have to keep highway maintenance right. We need to maintain that link between the communities. But I want to know how much data we have on footpath maintenance and which direction that's moving in the longer term, because it comes to mind because research during the spread of COVID-19 suggests that, amongst a number of indicators, obesity seems to be quite a major contributory factor, and obesity also has an impact on other health inequalities as well. So I think if we encourage our residents to get out and about more, we need to make sure that the links between our communities are safe and accessible. Now, I don't know what that figure tells us, the last figure that Tom set out. So could we have a closer look at the long-term impact of maintenance requirements on footpaths, please, Chair? As I say, it cuts across almost all of the thematic committees, certainly health, the economy, safer, stronger, and of course this one. Now, I believe it has been raised elsewhere, as I said earlier, but I'm not quite sure where we're at and if it actually has been raised. So can we put a marker down at this committee, please, so we can get some more information back on how that maintenance on footpaths is going, Chair? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Rob, in relation to that. Tom, have you got anything to add to that that could give confidence to Councillor Croot?
Not really, Chair, other than that I agree with Councillor Croot. We can get some more detail on that. Obviously, the 20.9% figure for footways is a global figure for the whole county, and there will be a much greater level of detail beneath that, down to individual geographical locations and the likes. There's a balancing act, as members will be aware, between all of the different types of highways and footpaths, and how our Mason pavers are sort of deployed across all of those different repairs, and it's probably something that we can prioritise in future if members decide to do that.
Thanks, Tom, and clearly we'll take note of that, Rob, and we'll make sure we get further detail on that report. Thank you. Okay, I've got no one else wishing to speak on this particular item, so recommendation on page 121, paragraph 13. That the committee is requested to consider the overall position, direction of travel in relation to Q1 performance and the impact of COVID-19 on that performance, and that the actions be taken to address areas of underperformance, including significant economic and well-being challenges because of the pandemic, be taken noted of. We've carried out that action. Thank you, members. Moving on to item 11 then, County Durham Environmental Partnership. You do have minutes there in front of you. Anne, have you got anything to add in relation to this?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the minutes from the County Durham Environment Partnership meeting on the 11th of March 2020 are for members' information. Members will be receiving a briefing note later this month that the County Durham Environment Partnership is undertaking a governance review, with a further briefing note detailing the outcomes of that review to be circulated to members in March 21. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that update, Anne, much appreciated. Thank you, and we shall await on those changes. Okay, moving swiftly on then to item number 12. Any other business? Just for information for members, just to remind you and the members of the public that Durham County Council have at this moment 2 live consultations on our website related to leisure centre transformation and new developments in terms of leisure centres, with a closing date of the 6th of December. Please take time to review those consultations and make comment as appropriate. I've not been informed of any other business, therefore that does conclude the meeting. So just like really to thank members for their attendance this morning, the comments made, and also members of the public who have attended. Members, please wait on confirmation that the broadcast has finished. Thank you again.